Hey there, and welcome to Broadband Deployment News. A new report by highspeedinternet.com shows that Google Fiber had the fastest broadband service among national providers, with some regional providers even faster. Be right back. Thanks for joining me. Rick Uzzi here with Zecorum with Broadband Deployment News. So I saw this story on Telecompetitor. Report finds big jump in 100 megabits per second connections, and Google Fiber has fastest internet, and that is based on this report from highspeedinternet.com. So I thought I'd go right into the report and look at that directly. You see here the fastest internet providers of 2023. So this highspeedinternet.com provides a lot of information about high-speed internet, as you might imagine, including they have a speed test. So they take information from their speed test, as you see here, millions of netizens take highspeedinternet.com speed test each year, and the results give us a comprehensive view of how internet speeds have been shaped by industry developments, technology advancements, and the global COVID-19 pandemic. In this report, we draw our speed test results to highlight the fastest internet providers in the U.S. in 2023. We also draw on our data to look at how many U.S.-based internet users get speeds of 100 megabits per second or faster on their home internet. With those insights, our report shines a light on whether America is ready for a new benchmark for broadband performance proposed by the FCC. So it's interesting because they have results back from previous years, so you can see how things have improved, how they progressed over the years. And they are taking a look. They're looking at this in two different sections here. So you see part one, what are the fastest internet providers right now? Then part two, they want to cover whether it's time to update the federal broadband internet standards to 100 megabits per second. So I linked to this report in the description, YouTube description below, and then I've got a few other links that I have in there from some sites that I'm going to pull up today. So part one, what are the fastest internet providers right now? So you see Google Fiber is the fastest internet provider, followed by Xfinity and Verizon. So right here, they're looking at the top 5 fastest national internet providers. And it's interesting that they put Google Fiber national, probably because they don't really cover a region, but they're not across the country like somebody like Comcast, Xfinity is, for example, or AT&T that has far more states covered. But so they list them with the top 5 national providers. And you can see here you got Google Fiber. And what they do is they look at an integrated speed score, and this is a good idea. So they've got, it combines 90% of a provider's average download speed with 10% of the same provider's average upload speed. So they're looking at it realistically in the sense that symmetrical service is not really as important to have symmetrical services as it is to have a higher download speed, because still, I mean, even though symmetrical is nice and it's a nice marketing checkbox to have, it's not really needed in most cases. So most people are doing, for the vast majority of what they're doing, it's receiving data, and it's not so much broadcasting data. I'm broadcasting right now, but most of the day I'm receiving stuff. So that's just the way it is with most people. Some people never broadcast stuff. I mean, they might do some Zoom calls here and there, but certainly that changed a bit over with the pandemic, but still the vast majority of data is going down. So that's what's most important. So that's how they look at it. So they look at a 90 to 10 kind of ratio there. They put them together, and they got Google Fiber at 171.4. And one thing that does do is it kind of discounts fiber a little bit as far as speed goes, because you might have a cable operator can offer a 1 gig by 500 or 1 gig by 250, and they're not close to symmetrical. And you could have a fiber provider that's doing symmetrical, but they're going to be ranked fairly close because of, again, not taking the upload speed into account as much or factoring that as much. And again, from a reality perspective, that's probably not a bad idea. So you got Google Fiber, Xfinity, Verizon, MetroNet, and Cox. So you can see these are the folks that they're classifying as national, and these are your top 5 providers here. And you can see, one thing they're not measuring, this is a speed test, so they're not checking as to whether somebody has a gig package or not. So, a lot of people don't get gig service. If they don't need it, they don't want to pay the extra amount for that. In some cases, they get it. Like I have it here with AT&T because I signed up and they kept raising my speed, and now I've got gig internet, but prices stayed the same. They give me a discount on the bill. So they raise the price and they discount it. So I have symmetrical gig service here because of that. Though it's available in only 19 cities. So again, they call it national, but it's only in 19 cities. Google's flagship fiber optic service has been the fastest internet provider since 2018, handily beating out all competitors every year. And soon it may see bigger gains as it unrolls new plans advertising 5 gig and 8 gig plans. So that was an announcement just recently, but here they just recently stated which is going to be the first city. So you see here, this is a story in Next TV, multi-channel news, I think that is. Google Fiber brings 8 gig symmetrical speeds to Mesa, Arizona last fall. It was last fall. Google Fiber announced plans to introduce 5 and 8 gig symmetrical tiers in 5 states in early 2023, and it looks like Mesa just went first. That was just announced just the other day, 23 hours ago, actually. And you see here, Google Fiber takes on Cox and Lumen in Council Bluffs. So they're still, Google is still out there pitching itself as a provider in lots of cities. Now, they do tend to go to cities where there's already service. So they're looking at overbuilding providers that are already there. You see here, taking on Cox and Lumen in Council Bluffs, Iowa. Back in 2016, they kind of hit the pause button. So they had made a lot of announcements. They had started deploying some cities. They had some setbacks, including fiber trenching technology that was not working well. They were doing very shallow fiber trenching, and some of that fiber was coming up. They weren't covering it well enough with this. I think there was an epoxy, if I remember, that they had to cover over where they did micro trenching in streets and whatnot. So they had some setbacks, and some setbacks as far as downsizing some of the group there. But obviously, with the emphasis on fiber and federal money coming, although they don't tend to go in areas where they could get federal dollars, but with a lot of the emphasis on fiber, they seem to have kicked into gear again. So you see here, looking at Council Bluffs, Iowa, and probably being able to offer the faster speeds there as well. So you see they took another plan this week that would provide service, struck a deal to build fiber on the FTP, fiber to the premise in Council Bluffs. Google's latest expansion move will pit it against incumbent. Yeah, that's basically the headline right there. So no need to read that. So back to this. Actually, back to this. So those are your national providers. And then they've got more details here. If you want to view the plans, those kinds of things, you can do that. They show the integrated speed score and the max advertised speed. So you got Google Fiber advertising at 2 gigs. You've got Comcast Xfinity up to 3 gigs. Verizon 1.5 to 2.3 gigs, Metronet 1 gig, Cox 1 gig. Then they talk about regional providers. WeLink takes a lead among regional internet providers. So these providers are not national, but they provide service in quite a few areas. So you got WeLink, 271.59 megabits per second. Then you got Buzz Broadband. So all of these are higher than what you were looking at here with these national providers. So these are regionals. You got Buzz Broadband, Cherokee County Electric Co-op, Altima Fiber, and Flash Fiber. And all of these 4 are actually electric co-ops. So Buzz Broadband, I had them up here. I'll pull them up here in a second. So WeLink is the only one that's not. And what's interesting is they call WeLink in here somewhere. I think we'll see it. They call them a fiber provider, but they're not a fiber operator, actually. They call it wireless fiber. So it's actually 5G service, but it's kind of misleading. It's not fiber. They call it wireless fiber, but it's 5G service. Obviously, there's some fiber. There's got to be some fiber backhaul and whatnot. But the service to the end user, the last mile, certainly the last mile is going to be fixed wireless 5G. I don't know if they're using millimeter wave or they're using. There are some technologies that can give you gig service even if you're not using millimeter wave. Maybe that because millimeter wave, you've got very high attenuation. You got to have lots of small cells. So they're probably using some technology that can allow them to have a little longer shots than you would on millimeter wave. So again, you see the providers here. Again, using that same 90 to 1 to 10 integrated score of download to upload. Over the past 12 months, the fastest regional provider, meaning any provider that serves fewer than 5 states. So maybe that's why Google serves more than 5 states, but there's just maybe a city here and there, in those states, larger cities, and again, not really rural areas. So it's WeLink. That's according to results from our speed test tool taken between January 9th, 2022 and January 9th, 2023. So basically the year ending January 2023. So here it is. Based out of Lehi, Utah, WeLink is a fiber internet provider that serves a handful of cities across the U.S. So they're not fiber. They're 5G. The other providers on this list are member-owned internet cooperatives that serve populations in rural and smaller urban areas in parts of the South. So again, you see the same info here as far as you got WeLink's max speed of 1 gig, again being fixed wireless. Buzz Broadband 2 gigs, Cherokee County Electric 2 gigs, 2.5 for Altamaha Fiber, and 2 gigs for Flash Fiber. And you can see where they serve. But again, I'm going to look at their a couple of sites here. So first off, I was going to go to Google. Actually, I'll go back to Google for a minute. So I looked up Google in Atlanta. You know, Google's got certain cities that they serve. And actually, is that listed in here? Yeah. So actually here you can see where Google serves. So you've got Atlanta, where I am. And they're showing fiber and they're showing WebPass. WebPass is a fixed wireless company that Google acquired. So they would count that as places that they serve. But you see here, so these cities here, fiber, then you got WebPass in Chicago, fiber, WebPass, etc. So these are the areas where Google's providing service, but you can see it's not all fiber. Some of it is this WebPass service. In Atlanta, Google's offering 2 plans. So you've got $70 a month for 1 gig and $100 a month for 2 gigs. You can see what it includes here, including a terabyte of cloud storage. That would be nice. No data caps or installation fees on these things. Professional install included for the 2 gig. So you can see what's available there. And then this is where they're showing that they are in Atlanta, or they say we're growing in Atlanta. So maybe it's places where you can eventually get it. I think most of these places you can get it now. So here's, this is the city of Atlanta right in here. And then you've got areas around it. These are northern metro areas right here, Marietta, Roswell. I think I was reading that Alpharetta, where our office is part of that as well. That would be kind of in this area up in here. You got Duluth. That's in Gwinnett County. You got Stone Mountain. So these are areas that are available in Atlanta. And pricing-wise, again, you saw the prices here for $70 a month and $100 a month. So you can get a gig, and that's the least plan you can get, but that's for $70 a month. And that's very comparable to what you'll see, as we see here from other providers. I think I pay $80 a month, $80 a month for AT&T. This is WeLink, wireless fiber speed. So again, this is wireless, and then you've got average US speeds of 100 megabits per second, and then you got gigabit speed from WeLink. And, as you saw there, not everybody's getting gig. And that's interesting too, because, I said that people are not necessarily taking a gig package, but Google, that's all they offer. So it's interesting that the average speeds, at least that's all it's showing in Atlanta. Maybe they do have lower speed plans if you ask about them, but the average speeds for Google were less than 200 megabits per second. And then what else do they say in here? Oh yeah, here are the plans. So they've got a flex plan, so that's $80 per month. If you pay monthly, you can do $70 per month. If you sign up for a 24-month plan, so if you commit to 24 months, you can get $10 a month off of that. $10 loyalty discount after 24 months. Okay. So it sounds like you get $70 a month. And then after 24 months, maybe you don't have to, then you can do month to month and you get a $10 monthly discount. That could be what that means. So that's WeLink. And then you've got internet here, Buzz Broadband. So Buzz Broadband is powered by Cherokee Electric Co-op. So again, that's an electric co-op. You got their 3 plans of 200 meg for 60, 1 gig for 80, 2 gigs for 100 approximately. So that's Buzz Broadband. And then you've got Flash Fiber. That's this Flash Fiber is coming, but I believe they're already there. Obviously, if they're doing speed tests, so people are already using that. Flash Internet, and that is powered by Joe Wheeler EMC, so that's an electric co-op as well. You can see here, very similar, 60 for 300 megs, a gig, $80, and then 100 for 2 gigs. So that's Flash Fiber. So I'm going to go back to this report. And we see which internet providers advertise the fastest speed. So AT&T's advertising max of 5 gigs, $180 a month. You can see Ziply Fiber, 5 gigs, $300 a month. Wow. Frontier, 5 gigs for $155 a month. Now, Frontier, obviously, a lot of their territory is DSL, so they've been in the process of trying to upgrade that to fiber. Optimum, 5 gigs, $165. Verizon, up to 2.3 gigs for $120. Google Fiber, 2 gigs for $100. We saw Windstream, 2 gigs for $170. Xfinity, 1.2 gigs for $80. And Mediacom, 1 gig for $70. So you go down the list here and you see those. And then you can check availability on any of these as well. Then you got satellite down here. Starlink, 110 to 120, or up to 100 megs. I'm seeing 110 now. I thought they were doing 90 and 120, and it depended on whether your area was congested or not. But now I'm seeing 110 in several places. So maybe their price generally is 110 now, and it may be 120 as it gets congested. So then you've got Viasat, and they're claiming 100 meg for 170, but they're a geosynchronous satellite service, so I don't know unless they've got something else that they've done where they can get up above that. Then you got Usenet, your traditional, again, geosynchronous, and this is generally more like what it is 25 meg if you can get that. It says here, a growing number of fiber and cable internet providers have boosted their internet plans to multi-gig speeds, including speed tiers, that's hard to say, reaching all the way up to 5 gigs. And I mentioned here, some of the stuff we looked at, Xfinity, Google Fiber, AT&T, and Frontier. And it points out, of course, most internet users don't get gig speeds, I guess unless that's all that's offered. Most people don't need those kinds of speeds. That's true. Most people don't. Again, a lot of times it's a marketing checkbox as to whether you can get a gig or not, because most people can do just fine with 300 megs or even 100 megs, depending on how many people you have in the home and what they're doing. In fact, less than that, depending on how many people are in the home, you can get a good experience. Of course, everybody wants higher speeds. I love that I can run a speed test, and you'll see what I got here in a minute. That I can run a speed test and I get those kinds of speeds, and it certainly helps having the headroom there. But most people don't need it, so most people don't pay for that if it's an extra cost. It says, in fact, your home Wi-Fi doesn't reach the top speeds advertised on your internet plan. That's true if you don't have Wi-Fi 6 or 7 coming out. 6 is out now. 6E, which would be using the 6 gigahertz Wi-Fi spectrum. You're not going to get the kind of speeds. And then you've always got other issues with Wi-Fi in the home, and what kind of congestion you have on the Wi-Fi network, where your Wi-Fi access point's located compared to where you are, those kinds of things. Then here's part 2. Is it time to update the FCC's broadband standards to a minimum of 100 megabits per second? July 2022, citing the increased demand for fast internet in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. This is talking about Jessica Rosenworcel, the chairwoman of the FCC. She called to raise the minimum to 100 megabits per download speed and 20 meg up. Are American internet providers prepared to consistently deliver on those proposed benchmarks? We took a look at 5 years worth of speed test data to see. Certainly broadband providers are moving in that direction. As you go to fiber, once you get to fiber, it's much less critical as far as you can easily get over those speeds of 100 megabits per second. The issue becomes for older technologies like DSL and some older DOCSIS, that's cable modem technologies, and some fixed wireless technologies. And as I've said before, if you raise the definition of broadband, then you automatically decrease the number of people who have broadband in the country, because suddenly, if somebody had 50 megabits per second before they had broadband, they maybe were considered underserved, but they had broadband. Whereas if you go up to 100, suddenly they don't have broadband. That's all that's changed is the definition. So that's one reason I think that the FCC hasn't changed it yet, because they don't want to say suddenly all these other people don't have broadband. They've taken it into account with the category of underserved being 120. So it's taken into account, and they're really pushing hard to get fiber everywhere. And if they get fiber somewhere, then it's not an issue at that point, because somebody can get 100 or better, because it's easy to do over 100 on fiber. So I think that's the tack that they're taking. So I'm expecting them to raise the definition, but I'm thinking they're going to, I would think they would wait until after maybe we get some of this BEAD money, at least the amounts of money that are allocated, and start to get an idea of what's going to be getting fiber and those kinds of things. And then it won't matter. Suddenly, hey, these people don't have broadband, but that's okay. They will soon. And they were going to have it anyway because of the money that's coming out. And this is interesting. It shows the timeline of the broadband definitions. And yeah, I remember this way back in 2010, it was 4:1. So if you had 4 megabits per second down and 1 megabit per second up, you had broadband. In 2015, they changed that to 25:3. So it's been 25:3 for a long time. And again, I think the reason it hasn't changed is because it's a moving target and we've seen progress. So even without the definition changing, we've seen progress as there's been more and more fiber, as we've had DOCSIS 3.1 come out and cable providers have been able to get well over 25:3. We've seen progress. And we've got funding based on these kinds of things that are coming out. In 2022, again, she's suggesting 100/20. Rosenworcel says the FCC's broadband standard should eventually be raised to a gig by 500 megabits per second upload speeds, although she didn't set a specific timeline. I think the reason they're not going to gig symmetrical there is to keep cable in play, because you then would suddenly have a lot of cable operators that would have difficulty doing gig symmetrical. And again, upload speeds, not nearly as important. So you don't want to throw a monkey wrench in all of that. If somebody can get 100/500, that's, I think, a good definition. And that way, cable operators that are providing those kinds of speeds are still viable as far as what is considered broadband. Average download speeds in 2022 were over 100 megabits per second for the first time. 2022, the average download speed for internet users in the US was 111.2 megabits per second, according to our speed test. Again, this does not take into account the plans that the people have. So we're looking at an average, but again, most people don't get gig service. So it could be much higher if we had more people taking the max packages that they get from providers, but they don't necessarily do that. Excuse me just a second, something in my eye here. How much internet speeds improved since 2018? Oh, first I missed this. So that's a massive jump from 5 years ago when average download speeds were at 41.5 megabits per second. That means download speeds have gone up 168% in just 5 years with more netizens. You haven't heard that term in years, and here I'm seeing it. Getting 100 megabits per second speeds or faster than ever before. How much have internet speeds improved since 2018? And you can see the speeds here. So you got 2018, 41.5 megabits per second, and then increasing up to 111 right here in 2022. But only 1 out of 3 US-based internet users gets 100 megabits per second or faster. This shows the percentage of speed tests with 100 megabits per second and over. And again, this is not taking into account the fact that people don't necessarily get the higher plans. They're not necessarily paying for plans that would get them anything higher than 100, or maybe, they're getting a 250 plan when they could get a gig. Despite the major gains the internet providers have made in recent years, the majority of Americans still don't get speeds of 100 meg or faster. According to our speed test, 32% of users get download speeds of 100 megabits per second or faster. That's 3 times more users than 2018, when just over 10% got that. Clearly, there's still a lot of room for internet providers to improve their speeds before most Americans meet the proposed FCC benchmarks. But again, internet providers may have plans over that. Interestingly, as the chart below shows, our data suggests that a large number of users are still coping with download speeds of 25 megabits per second or slower. However, enough users get speeds close to 100 megabits per second or over that number drives it up. That number drives up the average. Also, while very few internet users get speeds of 500 megabits per second or faster, those cases also bring up the overall average. Oh, yeah. So we know this. We know that a lot of people still don't have 25/3, and those are considered unserved and will be addressed by the BEAD money that's coming out. And you can see here in this chart how that goes in this direction here as we get, fewer and fewer people are getting these higher speeds. Tested internet speeds versus advertised speeds. Why are your speeds lower than what you pay for? Well, although you may be paying for an internet plan that technically can hit 100 meg, for example, it's likely that you regularly get download speeds below that mark in a speed test. One study from November found that internet users with gigabit plans in actuality got median download speeds in the range of 360 to 373. Advertised internet speeds are theoretically possible in lab conditions, but you aren't going to see them in most of the time, especially if you're using Wi-Fi over a router. It mentions router types, fluctuation of the wireless signals, those kinds of things. So that's true. A lot of times people are taking internet speeds on their Wi-Fi, and depending on where they are in the home and the Wi-Fi network and how fast it can go, that can make the speeds really not relevant necessarily to the connection. How many internet users get 100 megabits per second? There's some details on that. You can see the dates or the years and how that's changed. Again, about 32% now. Which internet providers deliver over 100 meg to most customers? These are alphabetical, so it's not, there's some around 60% here, including Google Fiber and Comcast, Xfinity. T-Mobile's bumped up quite a bit, so it mentions that here. So our speed test results suggest that fiber internet providers have seen some of the biggest gains in speeds, and that's not surprising, as the technology has improved and you've been able to do gigabit, and now we've got XGS-PON, and different speeds get faster running over the same glass, basically. Windstream and Frontier, which both offer a mix of DSL and fiber optic services, saw the biggest increase in users with 100 megabits per speeds between 2018 and 2022. These higher numbers reflect how fiber internet providers in general have pivoted away from antiquated services like DSL in favor of building up their fiber networks. That's true. You would expect them to see the biggest gains. Cable providers like Mediacom and Cox have also shown drastic rises in the number of users with 100 megabits speeds or faster. And that would be due to, again, technology increases going from DOCSIS 3 to DOCSIS 3.1, in some cases DOCSIS 4.0 kinds of technologies, mid-splits, high splits, extended spectrum DOCSIS. So they're able to get, especially these large providers like mentions here, Cox and Mediacom, and certainly Xfinity doing DOCSIS 4.0 kinds of things, are going to see big increases. More notably, T-Mobile showed an increase of 173% between 2019 and 2022. T-Mobile launched its 5G home internet service in 2019, and availability has vastly expanded since then. So that's true. So T-Mobile acquired a lot of mid-band spectrum and started launching 5G across the country in mid-band, which can provide really good speeds, not as fast as millimeter wave, but they can cover much bigger areas, don't need the kind of small cell technology that you would need for, and certainly the number of cells that you would need for millimeter wave. So it's not surprising. Interestingly, some fiber internet providers, notably Google Fiber, Metronet, and AT&T, showed much smaller gains. Really, that's not that interesting because it mentions it why right here. However, that's because these carriers were already delivering 100 megabit speeds or faster to a large number of users to begin with. So they already had it, so they don't see as many gains in that area. That makes sense. It shows the 100 megabit speeds for satellite providers, and again, it shows Viasat having some. I don't know if maybe they do some kind of business service where people would pay that. But I think for the most part, you've got Starlink right now that is able to do that. You've got OneWeb that's going to go into production here soon that will be able to do that, but that will be through resale in various areas. They're not going to go directly to consumers. Then you've got Amazon and their Project Kuiper that has shown what their terminals look like now, but they've not launched any satellites that I'm aware of, but they are going to be coming out sometime probably in 2024 with internet service. So then do you really need 100 megabit speeds? For many, the answer is yes, and then they show what you can do with that. What can you do? And they have some things here. And then what's the fastest internet plan you should buy? So they've got different information here. How many internet users get 500 megabits download or faster? And they've got that data. I won't go through all this. Again, I linked to this. Then they've got their methodology and their raw data and whatnot here. So I'll let you peruse that. Last thing I was going to show was I did a speed test. Again, I'm on AT&T Fiber. When I did it on my desktop, I thought, wow, I got 150 down and I think 100 up. And again, I've got gig symmetrical. And I did it on this laptop that I'm streaming from. And you can see I got, and this is kind of weird, higher upload. I got 657 down and 817 up from, and this is the high-speed internet site, so you can do a speed test there. And when I looked at it, it was powered by MLabs. So MLabs is powering the test, and that's what I got there. And by the way, I did that. When I did that on my desktop, I did it on this site, and I did it on Ookla, and I got similar kinds of results. So it wasn't just the speed test that was giving me wonky results there on my desktop. And then I did the same thing on here with this test and with Ookla. And with Ookla, I got almost a gig. I got 944.9 and I got 873 on the upload when I did the test right after I did it. And of course, that's going to vary on networks, and it's going to vary maybe what's going on my network internally. I'm not running on Wi-Fi, so both of these were on connected computers, so it shouldn't really be impacting it as far as my Wi-Fi network, but it's whatever is going on my internet connection back to AT&T, and then what's going on at AT&T and what's going on between both the test servers were in Atlanta. You see here, this was Atlanta, and the other server was Atlanta as well. Here we go, AT&T provider, server location Atlanta. But there could be congestion between the speed test server and whatever's going on there. So you can't always count on it being exactly the same and exactly accurate. Now, one thing I mentioned was people, don't usually get the speed that's advertised. And you can see I didn't get a gig. But a lot of times operators will give a buffer. Like I know cable operators, a lot of our customers will do this. They will do an increase in the speed. So if they say they're giving you 500 megabits per second, they might give you, 550 or 600 or something like that. They'll go over that so that you're more likely to get closer to 500 or even 500 if you do a test. So that is something that is going to vary depending on the service provider. So got a comment here. Let's see. So Anthony Crusco, you should test with the Speed Test Windows app. That's interesting because I think it was after I tested, I think it might have been on Ookla, I can't remember, on one of them. When I did the test, it came up and you said you should use the Microsoft's speed test thing in conjunction with this or something. Maybe that's what you're talking about. You should test with the Speed Test Windows app, not the browser. I recently made the change and see it's more closer to my provision service. That's interesting. So they said it would be, that's what you're talking about. They said it would be more accurate. So didn't download it, but that's a good point. Thank you, Anthony. And said you can also test with Task Manager open to see what operating system says while you're testing. So that's interesting. So you can see, like what your performance is if you have Task Manager open and what's going on in your PC and what it's doing when you're doing that test, or what your PC was doing even before you started the test. Because I'll tell you right now, I know it from this laptop when I'm streaming sometimes. It'll start downloading a Windows update and suddenly my face will freeze on the screen because it really takes, when you're doing a Windows update, it really does hit your PC hard, and it could hit the speed test hard as you're doing that as well. So interesting point. Thanks for that, Anthony. I appreciate that. So thanks a lot for joining me. Again, I've linked to some of those things in the description below. So if this was helpful or you like this, go ahead and give me a like on the video. I'd appreciate that. If you're not subscribed, click the subscribe button and click the bell to be notified when I'm live. I appreciate it. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.